Well, hey everybody. Uh, Rick here. I thought I would do a Wednesday night devotional for us. I was planning on doing outside in the swing again to get outside in this nice fall weather, but somebody was mowing the grass right next to me, and I couldn't I couldn't tape out there because it was too loud. I appreciate those of you who have been calling and checking on us during our quarantine because of Anna's bout with COVID. By the way, she's doing much better. She's been back at work for several days now, feeling much better. And we are only out of quarantine tomorrow. And so I tell you, I'm anxious to get out. But I appreciate everybody who's called and checked on us and brought food and offered up prayers on behalf of me and my family. We appreciate that a great deal. So because I couldn't go outside, I found a quiet spot here in Timothy's room, see the football, baseball on the wall, to tape a quick devotional. You know, we got word earlier today that Danny and Renee's granddaughter out in Boise, Idaho is not doing well. And, you know, COVID is terrible in all its instances, but especially when it affects the life of a young person like Ashley. And then combine that with the loss of Eddie so recently. And I know that Danny and Renee are going through terrible pain right now, as well as the rest of the Vines family. Danny and Renee, if you watch this, we want you to know that we are praying for you. All of our hearts go out to you, and we lift you up before the throne of God. You know, COVID has been so hard for so many people, and it makes a lot of people ask the question that is so often asked, and that is, why do bad things happen to good people? You know, Danny and Renee certainly don't have to, certainly don't deserve to face all this difficulty and pain in their lives, the lives of their families. And so we ask that question of ourselves, why do bad things happen to good people? And, you know, I wish there were a short answer that made us all feel better. But the truth of the matter is that's not the way it is in this life. This life often brings pain and suffering, even to those who are faithful. The good news is those of us who are Christians have something to hold on to during a time of pain and suffering. Sometimes, though, we can get to the end of our rope. We can feel overwhelmed. And I think that when I think about people that get overwhelmed because of their circumstances, sometimes I think about the great patriarch Job. Let me read a verse or two here in Job chapter 6. Job chapter 6, the Bible says, "But Job answered and said, Oh, that my grief were thoroughly weighed, and my calamity laid in the balances together. For now it would be heavier than the sand of the sea, therefore my words are swallowed up." Isn't that something to think about? Job expressing the idea that his sorrow would weigh more than the sand on all of the seashore. Sand is very heavy. I remember one time when I was a kid, my brother and I were outside playing, and we had us a 5-gallon bucket, and we were digging holes and filling that 5-gallon bucket up with sand, sandy soil down in Florida. And something happened, and the bucket slipped while it was full of sand, and it landed right on my toe. And that's the first time I ever saw a big toenail come off. And that was just 5 gallons of sand. Imagine what Job says here when he talks about all the sand on the seashore. Job's heart was certainly heavy. He had lost all of his children. His wife had turned her back on him, told him to curse God and die. He had lost everything, even his health. All his physical possessions, and then finally the devil even took his health away from him. And Job said that his grief was so heavy. He said his words were swallowed up. Do you ever feel like you don't know what to say in a situation that is filled with pain and grief? Your words just give out on you? That's how Job felt. He goes on to say, "The arrows of the Almighty are within me. The poison thereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves array against me." You know, that's how Job felt. Job felt like God was the one punishing him. You know, we are able to understand and take the view that it was the devil that was doing these things to Job. it wasn't God. Job never did really understand that. He cried out to God. He questioned why. He told God that, as we'll see, that he wanted to die. He wished he wouldn't have been born. But that was all because of the devil. You know, a lot of times it's the devil that's behind these bad things in our lives. And so God is not the cause of the suffering in our lives. Sometimes he allows it, but he's not the cause of it. And that was the same thing in Job's situation. He says, does a donkey bray when he has grass, or does the ox low over his fodder? In other words, the reason I'm crying out is because I'm hurting. If everything was fine, I wouldn't be suffering. I wouldn't be crying out like this. I wouldn't be questioning God. I wouldn't be at the end of my rope. He says, just like the donkey that has its hay and the ox that has its fodder, it has everything that it needs, and so it's quiet. But Job was not quiet. He wasn't able to stay quiet. He was crying out to God. He says, can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt, or is there any taste in the white of an egg? Isn't that interesting? He says that, when things are bad, it's hard to choke it down. You know, it's hard to go through these circumstances. It's hard to make it through this life when the chips are down. And it feels like there's nothing good in our lives. It can even take the joy out of life. Like he says here, there's no taste in the white of an egg. There's no good thing that he could enjoy. He says, the things that my soul refused to touch are as my sorrowful meat. Oh, that I might have my request. He says, God, as I'm going through this, I have one request of you. That God would grant me the thing that I long for. Well, what is it, Job? What do you want so much in this pain? Verse 9, he says, even that it would please God to destroy me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. Job was at the end of his rope. He didn't know what else to do. He wished that it would have been him in the place of his children. It would have been him that was cut off and killed instead of his children. And I think we can all, as parents at least, understand that. Just about any of us would take the place of our children. But that's not the way that it works. And especially when the devil's behind things. He's devious. He is vicious. He is a cruel, cruel enemy. And we can certainly see that in the life of Job. He says, that's what would give me comfort. Verse 10, then should I yet have comfort. Yea, I would harden myself in sorrow. Let him not spare, for I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. You see, he knew that he didn't have all the answers. He knew that he wasn't hiding anything from God. He knew that God knew how he felt. And God does know how we feel. And God is here for us. You know, the question about why do bad things happen to good people, it's not an easy one to answer. Sometimes it's sin. Sometimes it's our sin that we suffer for. Sometimes it's the sins of others that cause us to suffer. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's things that are completely out of our control, like whether or not we catch a germ, whether or not we come down with some disease, maybe even cancer. These things are not necessarily under our control. Now, sometimes they are. Sometimes these things are the result of sins in our lives. But sometimes these are just things that are out of our control, because sin entered into the world when Adam and Eve sinned and the world fell. And because of that, sin entering into the world, there's a lot of difficulties that we face in this life. Sometimes the troubles and trials that we face in this life are not really suffering at all. They're just difficult circumstances that we have to make it through. You know, some people call that discipline. You know, if you have to, say you were engaging in some kind of athletic contest. We just got done with the Olympics, and some of those things were weightlifting competitions or gymnastics competitions or track and field. In every one of those areas, you have to put forth a lot of sweat, a lot of pain in order to win the victory. And sometimes the suffering that we face in this life is just the pain of disciplining ourselves, controlling ourselves, so that we can ultimately win the goal. And then sometimes the suffering that we face are purifying us. You know, the Bible talks about gold being purified by fire. And so the idea there is that the purity of the gold is only seen after it's heated up and melted, and all the impurities rise to the top and are skimmed away, and behind is left something that is pure and valuable. Sometimes that's what we face in life. It's a purification process where we are made more valuable because the impurities in our life are burned away. That happens through fire, happens through trials. And you know, the problem is that when it's all going on, we don't really know what the cause is many times. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we don't know why we're facing the bad things that we're facing in our lives. And so bad things do happen to good people, but a good God is there with us throughout all these things. Imagine what it would be like to try to go through all of these sufferings without God, without your Christian family to help you and lend you the things that you need during that time, whether it's an encouraging word, a prayer, a meal, a call, just somebody letting you know that they are there for you. A lot of people are going through this life without that kind of help, that kind of encouragement, because they don't have any spiritual family that they can lean on. But what a blessing to us as Christians that we have God on our side and that we have His people on our side. I'm thankful that we can face these troubles that life throws at us, and we can overcome them. You know, ultimately that's what happened with Job. It's not wrong to question God. It's just wrong to turn your back on Him. It's not wrong to wonder why we're going through these things. It's just wrong to become unfaithful because of these trials in our lives. You know, the Bible shows us throughout the book of Job that he didn't turn his back on God. As a matter of fact, he came out better on the other side of the sufferings that he faced. And that's the way it'll be with us too. Not necessarily here in this life, but ultimately we'll go to be with God in heaven. And that's what the great blessing is of being a child of God. We have help here in this life, but most importantly, this life is not all there is. You know, if the atheist and materialist were right, and this life that were all there is, then suffering would be almost unbearable. But for the Christian, we realize that this life just lasts for a little while. It's called, this life is the proving ground of the soul. It will, looking back, our time here on this side of the river of life will seem so short, and eternity will seem forever, where there is no crying, where there are no tears, and where God is there to comfort all of His people throughout all the ages. What a wonderful blessing it is to be a child of God. We still face trouble in this life, but we know that God will be there and help us through it all. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you will continue to pray for our elders. I hope that you will most of all continue to remain faithful. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.